Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
I really liked this quote that I found on the Compelling Truth blog. Often parents who struggle with letting go are those who have taken the responsibility of parenting most seriously. After years of being so intentional about raising your child well, it is hard to take on a new role. You're listening to the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Julie Lyles Carr. We are in season 7. Hard for me to believe, but here we are. One of my very favorite things to do is to get listener questions and to have an opportunity to talk about my own experience with some of these things, to share some things I've learned, to be able to say, hey, don't do it this way. I messed up. So today we are going to be taking a look at that. I'm so glad that you're here. I ran across a question from a mama I know. She got on Facebook and she is in the process of getting into a new season of life. Now, in her case, she has one who's getting married. And then she has one who's graduating from high school. And so she's doing all the stuff. And, you know, when you're a mom, we're recording this in May. As we all know, May is the new December, right? I mean, it's everything from graduation parties to wedding showers and all of the end of school things that go on for the other kids and the dance recitals and the sports banquets and all the things. And so her question to me was, hey, you know, how do you handle it when you really want to stay in the place where you are, where you're feeling really reminiscent and you haven't really wanted this change to come? You've been really happy with having all the kids home. What helped in that shift? Did you ever feel that way? And I thought, you know, what a great question. Here's what I want to tell you. Whether you are expecting your first baby or you are launching your last kiddo into the world, this whole place of entering new seasons is big. And I want there to be something that's a takeaway for anyone, wherever they are in their parenting journey with their kids. If you are listening to this and you've got really little ones, I hope there are some things that I share that stay with you as you look in perspective at what this season is like and the season you're going to be heading into in a few years. If you're someone who is in the midst of the launch season where you're getting the first couple kiddos out the door, but then you've got one or two or more still at home, how do you navigate that? And if you are releasing that last one into the big wide world and you're really having some struggle with that, well, I hope there's a takeaway for you here as well. So I'm really hoping that we can cover a lot of different stages and seasons of life when it comes to this parenting thing and kids launching. Now, my friend Bonnie, she's the one who put this question up on Facebook, and she was asking if I'd ever done an episode on this, and I had to think about it. And as it turned out, we did a series back a couple of years ago during the summer called Seasons, and we had a lot of different guests on. We were talking about different seasons of life. And as a kickoff to that series, I did do sort of a quick snapshot of where my life was at 2 years ago, what was happening, because at that point, we had had 3 kids get married in the course of, let me think, what was it? I think it was 14, 15 months. I mean, it was like really fast, all during the pandemic too, which was a whole party. So if you want to go back and listen to that episode, I'll have Rebecca put that up. I'll be talking about a few of the same things, but now I'm 2 years further on down the road and we've had more season change, if you will. And so there are some more things that maybe I can help share. I was listening to a podcast with someone who's in the publishing world, and they were talking about how we have these different times where we're either a fellow struggler, or we are what he referred to as a Sherpa, where we're just a little bit further up the trail and we're reaching a hand back and saying, hey, I've been where you are. I'm reaching a hand back. I'm going to show you how I climbed that part. And then there's that place of being a sage, where you really are the person who has earned that credential. You have done the thing fully. You can look back and see the results and you can be a sage. I would say when it comes to this whole place of launching, I feel like I'm somewhere between fellow struggler and Sherpa. I'm still kind of in the thick of it. I have launched several of the kids, but I still have several to go. There are things that I've learned to do and to not do that I'm happy to share, but there are still some things that I'm figuring out and some issues that may be different with the different kids as they begin to launch. Because, as you know, that was the whole premise of my book, Raising an Original, that came out a few years ago, was each of our kids are so different and unique. And that's one of the things I will say. Each launch for your kids is going to be different and unique. You may have a child that it feels more challenging or your emotions are more heightened. And it doesn't mean you like or love that kid more. It's just different. And then you can have a kid that their launch just seems a little more exciting or smooth or something. That just has to do with the individuality of that child, the individual parenting journey you've been on with that specific child. This really came home to me as we began the process of launching. If you're a longtime listener, you may have heard me talk about this before, but I really thought I was going to be someone who was not going to experience the empty nest emotions. And the reason I thought that was because, I had always been working toward the launch. I had always been thinking about, hey, I want to see my kids go out and be successful and do the things they want to do. And I want to make sure when they leave this house, they may not be equipped with a lot of stuff, but I want them to know that I know they can do it. They can do it. They can do it. I'm sure there are plenty of other things that I'm going to forget, but our entire journey with our kids, particularly in our homeschool philosophy, was I want them to be autodidactic. I want them to know they can teach themselves to do anything. And I have full confidence that they can figure it out. Hey, kiddo, I know you can figure it out. So I was feeling pretty good about myself. I really thought I had it figured out too. Because when my first launched from home, that initial launch we experienced with her was her going for a year for study abroad. And I think part of what happened when she did that was I probably would have been a lot more sad. My youngest kids were only 3 when she headed out, my oldest headed out to go live in France for a year and to do a year at the Sorbonne. And when that happened, there were some emotions that were churning, but at the last minute, her housing fell through. And I had to go into that immediate mode with her. She was absolutely panicked when this happened, understandably. She's getting ready to get on a plane, go across the ocean to Europe, to France, to a place she's never been. And now the place she was supposed to live, all those details fell apart. She was freaking out, as you can imagine. And I had an option at that point. I could freak out with her, or I could tell her that I knew she could figure it out. And so that's the mode I went into. And you know what? She did. She figured it out. It was amazing the doors that God opened for her once she got there. Kind of had to make that step of faith, not really clear what was going to happen. But because of that, and because of the fact I knew that she was scheduled to come home in a year, I got sidetracked, got a little distracted from some of the emotion and trying to fix everything as we were putting her on that plane. And then also I knew she'd be back. And so I gave myself too much credit, I think, my friends. Then our second daughter, she was living in our home, then moved here still in Austin and was living with a friend. So that was great. She was close by. Our first one to get married is our third child, our oldest son, but he's our third child. And he was getting married to someone who had been one of his dear friends for a long time. And then they fell in love and it was amazing. And we've adored her for so long. And they had planned on living here in Austin and actually are still living here. So when he got married, even though he was the first one to make that substantial of a launch, it still didn't feel all that emotional in terms of I knew he and his wife were planning on living here. And so, again, I think I gave myself too much credit. And then my second daughter met her husband, and once they got married, they live in San Antonio, which for me, if you're doing the math here in Texas math, that's just kind of a few neighborhoods over. It's about an hour and a half away. And so that didn't feel too daunting as well. My oldest daughter ended up accepting a job in Chicago. It was supposed to be like a 1-year contract. So in my head, I thought, oh, I'm totally fine. She's going to Chicago, no big deal. Except now she's been living there for years and years, and she met her husband there. They got married last year, and they're still in Chicago. But again, like I said, I thought I had figured out all of the launch emotions, and I was really proud of myself for how I was keeping it all together. That is until my fourth child, my third daughter, my fourth child, she got married. They got married here in Austin. She married a U.S. Marine, and they were going to be heading back many miles away to where his base is, where he's based out of. I can tell you, when that kid got married and she got in the car and they pulled away, I lost it. I was beside myself. And honestly, I was shocked at the level of emotion. I'm still unpacking that. I still don't quite understand why on that kid the change seems so significant. And all of a sudden, those emotions I'd heard people talk about when it came to releasing their kids, it all came screaming at me. I talked about all of that experience in that episode that I told you about, that launch that we did for a series called Seasons. So you can hear more details on what all that was like. But that was kind of my moment of thinking, this empty nest experience, even with 8 kids, even with 16 and a half years from the oldest to the youngest, who are twins, there may be a whole lot of emotion and a whole lot of different paths on this journey, instead of it just sort of being a one-time event. That's one of the things that I think is really important to think about, is that you don't just launch it all at once, right? It's kind of a prolonged season of launch. And because of that, I think that we have to be kind to ourselves, that it may feel a lot of different ways each time one of these changes comes. Because in a sense, you're held in a state of perpetual change a little bit as you are sending your kiddos out into the world, depending on the number of kids that you have. I really liked this quote that I found on the Compelling Truth blog. Often parents who struggle with letting go are those who have taken the responsibility of parenting most seriously. After years of being so intentional about raising your child well, it is hard to take on a new role. And that's really true. When you've been so invested in your kids' lives and then that winds up, you are left at times thinking, wow, where am I in this whole thing? Who am I in this whole thing? How am I supposed to be spending my time? What are supposed to be my priorities now? How am I supposed to incorporate relationship with this child who's now an adult? How much is too much overparenting in that situation? How much is pulling back too far? These are all questions that start to come up when you look at this launch. Now, specific to my friend's question, she was asking, what do you do about feeling really reminiscent about the times that you've had with your kids, really wishing everybody was still kind of all under the same roof? This is something that is interesting to me. I, in a sense, even though I have been very emotional, particularly about my fourth child moving away and moving out with her U.S. Marine husband, I can tell you this. I did not have the sense of, man, I wish they were all just little babies again. I have really enjoyed getting to know my kids as teenagers and young adults. I've been fascinated by that. And while of course, I miss that when they were, I love babies. I love babies. I love toddlers. I love little kids. I think they're the most entertaining, so much fun, all the things. But I truly have loved experiencing my kids as they've been growing up. I will tell you this, and I think this is important to note. My husband has probably had a little bit harder time with realizing they're all grown. And part of that was the way we split duties with kids. You know, I've worked on most of my kids' childhoods, but I have really been blessed that I've been able to do quite a bit of that through officing at home or through vocational ministry, where I was often taking some of the kids with me, that kind of thing. So I had my kids alongside me a lot of that time. And in my husband's career, there would be stints where he would have some long weeks and long periods away for business travel and on and on and on. So I think in some ways, now I'm speaking for him, I actually probably should ask him this, but I think that there is that sense that it happened really fast for him, that they all of a sudden were growing up and launching and leaving the nest. And because I'd been so in the weeds with a lot of it, I was seeing it coming more real time, I guess maybe. So I think that's something really important to point out. You may have one experience of your kids launching. Your spouse may have another experience of your kids launching. And here's the thing. Both experiences are legit. Both experiences are important. And if you have a spouse who's like, hey, I loved having the kids home, but I'm ready for them to be out, you don't need to feel hurt or offended by that. That's just their experience. And if you have a spouse who's really, really struggling with the kids launching, you don't have to talk them out of that. It's okay for them to experience that because it can feel like a loss. It can feel like a shaking of everything that has been part of your daily life. All emotions surrounding this are valid. And when we can validate those emotions in each other as these kids' parents, and we can talk about the experiences we're having with these kids launching and the change that represents, that can make us stronger as a couple for the days that are going to be coming up where all of a sudden we aren't running everybody to soccer practice and ballet and all the things all the time. I wanted to share a few things that I've noticed about myself in this season. Now, I still have 4 kiddos at home. For a period of time, we just had 3. One of my kids had graduated from business school and he was doing some different things and he was traveling and different things, and he came back to us for a period of time. He's still with us right now and he has some big plans that are going to be coming up in the next few months, but at this point, we've had 4 people back in the house. So we have had 2 people that I consider young adults, my son who is done with business school and to come back to us, and then my daughter who is at UT, University of Texas, and then my twins who are just finishing up their junior year of high school, which is bananas to me, but here we are, because in my head they're 3, but they're not. So we are kind of in that home stretch, you know what I mean? Like we are in the final lap to some degree. And I will tell you that one of the things that's been interesting, I don't know how you were raised, but with my parents, my brothers and I went away to college. We lived in the dorms and we went a long way away to college. All 3 of us ended up attending the same university, and it was many, 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 many miles away from my parents. So I went to college when I was 17. And from that point forward, I was basically out of the nest. Now, my parents were very generous with us. They worked really hard so that they could send my brothers and I to this university. And they took care of tuition and they took care of housing. We had other things we were responsible for financially, but they did that for us. But the deal was, hey, we're going to get you through college, but then you're on your own. After that, that's it. And particularly once you get married, whenever you choose, if you choose to get married in college, you're on your own. If you choose to wait until right after you get out of college, fine. But here's the deal. We do college and then you are a grown-up. You go do your thing. I've noticed in today's world that launch is not as clean. It's not as succinct with a lot of families I know as it was with my parents. And I don't think my parents were that unusual. I had a lot of friends that was kind of the deal that was going down. Either when you graduate from high school, you graduate from college, you're out. That's it. You're done. Love you. Bye. Don't let the front door hit you in the behind. You know what I mean? So I think now I see more families trying to figure this out. I know part of it is because college costs have risen so much and housing costs at college have become so expensive that a lot of parents, in an effort to try to help their kids not take on insurmountable college debt, or bigger families like ours with 8 kids, we committed financially. We knew we wanted to help our kids get through college, but we knew we were not going to be able to pay for cool apartments and fancy dorms. So we had to come up with our own system of how we were going to tackle this for our kids. I see a very different attitude amongst parents and kids around some of this. I got to be honest with you. I never wanted to move back in with my folks. I was so ready to be independent. I mean, sure, I had times I was homesick and times I thought, man, it might be a little easier if I was still living at home. But I really, really wanted my independence. Today, because I think we've done a great job many times as parents of fostering such friendships and closeness and trying to give our kids a little more margin, a little more room. That often leads to our kids maybe feeling like, why should I move out? This is a great deal. It's going really well. And when we look at expenses and college costs and all kinds of things like that, like I said, that launch pad isn't quite as clean. And because of that, I think that I have experienced people who've done a really good job putting some structure and expectation around that. Mike and I really haven't done that as much. Again, I was operating more from a system of assuming they'd want to get out of the house. And several of them went ahead and launched when they were younger. So we're still figuring that part out. That's one of those places that I'm going to say I'm a fellow struggler. I don't know that I exactly have it figured out yet. I do really admire my friends who have said, okay, while you're in college or just post-college, you can be with us, but it's for X amount of time. Here's your financial responsibility about being back in our home. Now, we for sure have done things like assigning kitchen days and shopping duties and things like that to help run the household, because I just hit a place with my work and frankly, my level of fatigue as these kids got older, where I was like, I can't keep holding all this down and serving this many adult people who are also capable of doing all these things. And so I give Mike a lot of credit on this. He figured out some different things and put together a schedule and was like, look, we got to come up with a way to coexist. And now we're having those conversations about what it looks like to get people launched on out. So again, just know going into this launch season, I think in particular in today's world, it can look very different for a lot of different families. I am really thankful that we've had a little bit of extended time actually with all of our kids. Nobody left at 18. We worked out a deal where we would pay in-state tuition and you could live with us. And if you wanted to do private school or you wanted in-state tuition at a university, because we have several state universities pretty close to us, and you wanted to move out, that was fine, but you needed to earn your living cost in order to do that. That's how we handled it. Now, that meant that several of the kids, actually all of the older kids, were in the house a couple, 3, 4 years longer than a lot of people are, which for our family was great because it meant that the younger children actually got to experience family with their older siblings. Like I said, there's 16 and a half years between our oldest child and our youngest, the twins. My twins, I love it that they have a close relationship with their sister. She's done a great job to continue to foster that. Even though she launched when they were still really young, they have solid memories. And if she had fully launched at 18 and moved to the dorm and never moved home and all that kind of stuff, the twins were so little. They would have been like 18 months old. So they would not have had a lot of memory of her. So I'm thankful for the extended launch pad season that we've had. But I know that not all families operate that way. Just know that there are different styles to how all this works, which I think is also part of the emotional experience, because it's not like all of the parents of the kids who are in your kids' senior class are all experiencing the same thing at the same time. And there's sort of a community of all of us where all the kids are going and they're all going to this school and they're all going into the dorm. That's just not how it works anymore. So it is kind of interesting. We don't have as much of that community feel, I think, as we used to when everybody was sort of doing the same thing, if that makes sense. So let me share a couple things I've noticed. With those 4 still in the house, to have gone from 8 in the house to 4 at this point is still a really significant change. And one of the things that I've definitely recognized in myself that is unique is there's something about the tolerance level that you build as a parent when you're in the thick of the crazy. Okay. So when it's every single night getting so-and-so across town to this and making sure so-and-so's got the spelling list done and making sure that so-and-so has the stuff for the competition this weekend, when you are in that season, which is so heightened in later elementary school, junior high, high school, all the activities that are going on, there is a tolerance that you build to all of the activity, all of the inputs, all the details that you're having to carry all the time. When that starts to quiet a little bit, when your kids start to get some autonomy, when they can get themselves to different places, when you're not the one having to do it all the time, at least what I found in myself is that now I need a little more space these days. It's almost like my tolerance for all of the wild has dropped a little. And so now that things are calmer and our norm is different, it's like my nervous system has readjusted. And I can find that when things get super duper busy, or we're down a car and I need to get somebody around or whatever, I can find myself starting to feel some anxiety and some stress that feels a little heightened, even though I know that I carried a far heavier burden just 10 years ago. It still feels big. And so if you find, even with kids launching, as much as you miss them and all the things, that when they're home, it feels a little wild, or when everybody's back in the nest, it feels a little overwhelming, at least for me, I think that's kind of normal because you have readjusted. Another thing I'm finding that's interesting too, I deeply feel now the need for my own physical space, both just my physical affection and things like that. And I'm still a super physically affectionate person. But it's different when you've got little kids hanging off you all the time. And then when that starts to shift. And I also find that whereas I used to be able to handle a lot more easily the kids being in my office and going through my drawers and taking my scissors and things like that, I used to be able to go with the flow a little more on that. Now, oh, girl. So I don't know what it is about the launch, but there is something to it, that need for space. Don't feel guilty about that. You were given a huge amount of grace to navigate all of the inputs that you had going on in those most active years of mothering. And it's going to readjust as things start to simmer down a little bit. It's probably one of the number one questions I get being a mom of 8 kids. And that question is, what on earth are y'all doing about college? And I can tell you, with 8 different kids, 8 different learning styles, 8 different ideas about what the kids want when it comes to their careers and all of the rest, college has been a big topic of conversation around here. Well, there is a university that I want you to know about because it just hits so many of the things that are really important when it comes to considering your kids' college education. George Fox University, it's the #1 private school in Oregon. It's a Christian university. It's located in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. And what's so great is in addition to a top-notch education, students have the opportunity to grow and deepen their faith, and they can learn in this really pivotal time in their lives who God made them to be. I mean, let's face it, we need more people coming out of our universities who know how to be leaders and how to be leaders with character. And George Fox University offers more than 60 academic majors. And that includes a nationally recognized engineering program, a nursing program. It allows your student to pursue their passions and prepare for the calling that God has for them. And let's not forget about fun when it comes to college. George Fox University students have a great student life. There are weekly campus events, there's chapel, there's service opportunities. There are 23 NCAA Division III athletic teams. Here's something that is important to me. There's a study abroad opportunity. So if your student wants to go and experience life somewhere else for a semester, they can do that. There's outdoor recreation because, of course, we're talking about Oregon, so gorgeous. George Fox University could be just the perfect fit for your student as you are looking into college, career, and all that goes beyond. George Fox University, where your student will learn and thrive in the center of it all. Now, I would say my main struggle, the place where I feel the most emotional, is when I don't have all my people together for a long period of time. Where this has really come into play is with my daughter who married the Marine. Now, if you're a listener who has a spouse in the military or you're from a military family, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Trying to plan and schedule time with she and her husband is so challenging based on his career. And trying to get them back here to us so we can have time with them. And thankfully, his extended family all lives here close in our area. But even that, trying to get my daughter and her husband here, have time with them, schedule holiday time, it is very, very difficult. And that is when I find my emotions getting real cranked up again. There's something afresh about that that really gets to me when I can't have all my people together. And it's been a while now since we've had everybody together. Now, here's a beautiful thing that comes as a result of that. While that part is hard, I've rediscovered, or I'm discovering afresh, depending on where this, which child it is and where in the lineup in which they were born, of having one-on-one time with each of my kids. So I'll run down to San Antonio to spend time with my daughter who's there. I will run up to Chicago to spend time with my daughter who's there. I will run out to California when I can to see the daughter who's there. I will have time with my son who lives here and with each of my in-law kids. And Mike and I schedule couple trips to go and spend time with them. And when you've been in a bigger size family, or even when you have been in a family with 2 or 3 kids, think about it. That one-on-one time gets harder and harder to achieve the busier and busier you get as your kids are getting older and in those late elementary, middle school, high school years. So there's this beautiful rediscovering of what it means to have more focused time with each of them and to just connect, because now they're grown-ups. You're not having to meet all these different physical needs and make sure that the permission slip signed and all that kind of stuff. You're able to just focus relationally. That has been a beautiful thing that I didn't really think about as one of the benefits of the launch, was that there would be time that it could just be that one-on-one. That's a really amazing thing. The other thing that I want to encourage you is in this. As your children go into their adult years, they're still your babies, they're still your kids, and they all of a sudden have a different window into the life that you've been conducting. There are things that come into focus for them. There are things they now understand that they did not understand when they were living in your house and they were your kid and you were taking care of everything. My son and his wife, who live just about 10 miles away from us, which is so awesome, they bought their first house, and the tales that they can tell now of home maintenance and home repair and the choices they've had to make and on and on and on, and how they will reflect back to us and how my son will reflect to my husband and I. I remember when you guys would worry about this or work on that or be trying to decide this, and oh, now I get it. There are so many things that as your kids launch, you're launching into a new relationship with them. And Lord willing, it's going to be the kind of relationship in which you have an even greater understanding of each other. I mean, how amazing is that? Now, there are going to be differences too, because your kids are going to choose to do some things in a way that you didn't do it that way. And it's not exactly what you would do. And you might not always agree with every decision. And yet, they're going to get to live their life just like you did, and they're going to get to learn from that just like you did. And in the learning, in that process, in that whole mystery of what it means to become a, air quotes, adult, I have found there is a commonality and a connection that is now fresh and new. It's a beautiful thing. Now, I will tell you this too. We had kids so early in our marriage that we're really hopeful God gives us time for Mike and I that's for us. We had our first baby 15 months into our marriage. That was not the plan. You've probably heard me talk about this before. We had all these career goals and all these things we were going to do. And then we found out we were expecting. And it was the most wonderful. We were so crazy about her. My husband, you may have heard me say this before. People have a hard time believing it. He didn't really want kids at all. And so when we found out we were expecting her, he was trying to get his head around it. And the minute she was born, he fell crazy in love with her. And so much so that here we are, all the way up to 8 kids. Now, what's incredible in that to me is we have loved our time with people in our house and active parenting. It also makes me realize what an incredibly short amount of time we had to try to determine who we were as a couple. For us, I think it's going to be really interesting to be defining who we are as a couple once all these kids are launched, because we didn't have that 3, 4, 5, 7 year run before they were born to get that figured out. Our whole marriage, basically from 6 months in, because we had been married 6 months when we got pregnant with our daughter, then everything became about that pregnancy to 9 months, then had her at 15 months. Basically we had 6 months of a marriage to determine who we were as a couple and how we wanted to do things. And then boom, we had this huge life change. So I'm truly looking forward to rediscovering this spouse of mine, this guy I've been married to now for all this time, but it's been in the context of kids. And sure, we've done date night and we've done the things and we've done the workshops and the books and all the things, right? But it still is going to be so unique for us to have time where we're not still running kids here and there and talking about all that kind of stuff. So here's what I want to leave you with, because I get how hard it is when you really want to stay where you've been. I get it. I still at times I just never sleep like I sleep when all my people are back under my roof, right? When everybody comes home for a holiday or for a wedding and I've basically got everybody here sleeping under the same roof, and it's like, oh, now I can sleep because all the babies are back in the nest. You feel it, right? But here's just a few things to think about. First of all emotions are welcome, like we talked about before. I think that's really important. Whether you feel kind of relieved your kids are launching, whether you're really sad, whether you have parent guilt, like, man, this happened so fast, I wish I'd done X, Y, Z. Hey, all those emotions are valid. Acknowledge them. There they are. It's okay. It's okay to feel all kinds of different ways in this. I want to encourage you to rediscover yourself and your marriage. That's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to figure out who Julie is, the Julie who's not identified by having 8 kids trailing behind her at Costco. So much of my identity, so much of my career identity has been seated in, oh, she's the girl with 8 kids. And I'm so happy to have 8 kids. And I'm so happy to have 4 in-law kids. And I'm so happy to have a grandbaby. And it is a huge part of who I am. But I'm also excited to discover who I am apart from all of that. I'm excited to discover what my marriage is apart from all that. Now, this is one that's a little tough to hear, but you're going to have new fears for your kids as they launch. I would just love to tell you that, we got them educated, we got them launched, they are productive members of society. Done. Not worried about it anymore. Oh, no. You got new fears. You got new things you worry about. You worry about their faith walks. You pray for their marriages. You pray for their finances. You pray for their jobs. Like all the things, it continues. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to lean into God even harder. You really are, because it feels less under your control, as if it was ever under your control anyway. But even less so when they launch. I think that's part of the emotion with the launch, is that even though us thinking we have control has all been kind of a fantasy anyway, when they launch, you really feel that sense that you don't have control anymore. And so that need to lean in even harder to God, to pray for your kids, to pray for their faith walks, to pray for their work, for their marriages, for their families, more important than ever. I will tell you this too. One of my brothers, he experiences vertigo from time to time, and he has a really funny thing that he says whenever he has one of these vertigo spells. He says to him, it's like he realizes all of a sudden with vertigo, that filter that we have in place that keeps us from feeling the revolution of this planet around the sun. You know what I'm talking? The Earth's always spinning, right? But we don't feel it. But he laughs about with vertigo, all of a sudden it's like you plug into the spin. You really notice it again. And that's to me what launching our kids feels like. It's almost like all of a sudden I can feel time. I can feel it. This thing that I'm able to kind of put at a distance and every now and then pull out some pictures and go, oh, I can't believe how little they were on that holiday. Or, oh, look at that. Just 4 years ago, Jacob was so much shorter and now he's taller. He's almost as tall as his tallest brother. Those moments, you feel time, right? You see a representation of it. But there's something about when they launch, to me, that, man, I've really felt the spin of time. So just know that's, if you're feeling that too, well, I think that's pretty normal. And here's a little word too. If you're the mom who's listening, and for whatever reason, it feels like your kids aren't launching, aren't ready to launch, there are issues, there are challenges, you're not where you thought you would be at this age and this stage, I want to encourage you in this way. The timing of these things is individual. And I think we do put an expectation at times that a launch is supposed to look or feel a certain way. And then we open up our social media and our friends have all their pictures from graduation and they've got their pictures of their daughter's wedding and all the things that seem to be happening in May and June this time of year. All these markers that feel like what a quote unquote successful launch is supposed to look like, and you're sitting there going, wow, that is not my reality. I just want you to know God sees you. God has his own kids who are struggling with the launch. God has his own kids who he's going to just have to keep close. And so I don't think this is an easy thing to do. I don't exactly have the right encouraging thing to say or a to-do list on that. But if that's where you find yourself, be kind to yourself. Be kind to your kid. Make sure you're plugged into community. Be honest with the challenge. Get the help you need. Get to a counselor, get to a therapist. Stay active in your small group. Take walks frequently. Journal. Take care of yourself. Because when you are called to stay in a caregiver role longer than what you thought, it's hard. It's hard. And it could make you look at people who are sad about launching their kids and think, what's wrong with you? Like, your kids are healthy. Your kids are doing okay. Your kids are quote unquote where they're supposed to be. Do you understand the blessing of a launch? And I'm not getting to experience that. It's okay to be sad about that too. That emotion is valid. That's the tough thing about launching our kids. The risk for comparison, for how someone else has handled it, for what somebody else's kid did by a certain age, for what another family situation looks like, it can come into this season and it can make us discontent with where things are at or where things are going. Just know, God sees all of it. God does have plans for our kids. God does have plans for our lives. God has organized our lives into seasons. There are seasons that are hard to say goodbye to. There are seasons that are hard to stay in when it doesn't feel good. There are seasons that are hard to even know what it's going to look like because we haven't journeyed there yet. And frankly, I have to tell you, in some ways, I don't often feel like I really have a role model for what the next is supposed to look like for me. That's another place where I feel like I'm a fellow struggler. And yet, I think the launch can be exciting and wonderful and sad and a little melancholy and interesting, and we can have curiosity about it. And the God of all the seasons is the God who's going to hold us. Hey, I want to thank you for letting me just talk through some of this because, man, I am right there with you. And this reminds me again, we love it when you send questions and comments, when you let us know about the things that are in your life right now that we can talk about. We would absolutely love it if you would get in touch with us through any of the social that we have for AllMomDoes. You can go to my Instagram page, Julie Lyles Carr on Instagram. You can send me a DM, whatever. We love doing this kind of stuff. So if you have any questions, if you're in a season of life where you're like, hey, I've got really little ones and here's what I'm struggling with, or we've got this going on or whatever, I would love for you to send that in and we can design a whole episode or find a guest who can speak with authority on that or whatever. So let us know because we really are here to serve you. A big thank you to Rebecca. She's our producer and content coordinator. She puts together all the show notes. Check those out. And be sure and follow AllMomDoes on all the socials. Like I said, I love to see you too on Instagram. And I will see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.